have a timer going here just in case someone gets enthusiastic and goes a little overboard. So let's go ahead. Dr. Byrne?
I always do. The National Park Service is presently conducting a public comment period for the scoping process for planned environmental assessment. The EA will evaluate potential improvements to most of the 18-mile-long Mount Vernon Trail and the Fairfax County section of the George Washington Memorial Parkway. The public comment period will end on January 4th. My written comment provides the URL for the announcement for the scoping period and its comment period. I think Vincent also should have it. The project will increase the width of the trail from 8 to 9 feet to at least 11 feet in Arlington, on Columbia Island in DC and in Alexandria. The new width will be at least 10 feet in Fairfax County. In some places, the project may create separate pedestrian, bicycle trails whose combined widths will be larger, similar to the WD trail proposal. The adverse environmental impacts of the trail widening include the addition of impermeable surfaces near the Potomac Rivers Resource Protection Agency, as well as damage to trees and their roots in the north and the loss of tree canopy. Participants in the scoping process can propose measures that will help mitigate the project's adverse impacts. They can suggest beneficial changes to areas near the trail and within the parkway in Arlington and elsewhere. That's the most important thing about it. If proposed, those changes can convert many of the mowed lawns near the trail's roots to natural areas such as meadows and woodlands. They can also create pollinator habitats within the parkway's median strip by reducing the median's mowing. However, many people need to recommend these changes to actually have them happen. These mitigations will be important changes that can greatly improve the importance of the environment of one of Arlington's largest parks. If you want to see them happen, suggest them in comments that you send to the NPS no later than January 4th. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we're going to turn it over to Ann Bodine with Mary Glass to follow. Ann? I think you're muted, Ann.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so sorry. Okay, I'm ready. First of all, happy holidays to all of you, and thank you for all the work that you've done over the last year. I respect all of your service. I'd like to invite all of you to go to the homepage of Arlingtonians for Our Sustainable Future and read a comprehensive paper that they just published on missing middle impacts. In particular, I'd recommend the chapters on environment and energy, parts of which I briefed this commission on last month, on land use, on fiscal and infrastructure issues, and on diversity. ASF is taking issue in this paper with staff claims that missing middle doesn't pose any challenge to any of our comprehensive plan goals. I would say, of course it does. The ASF paper shows that missing middle is not compatible with stormwater goals of protecting the watershed and preventing flooding, nor with the goal of becoming a carbon neutral community by 2050. And it makes it all but impossible to reach our 40% tree canopy goal. If we dial out to the strategic level of the county goals, we'll see various sub-elements of the comp plan have become so much window dressing. The FNRP draft itself recognizes there's little plannable space remaining on existing county-owned land, so opportunities to offset future losses will be limited by the need to conserve natural areas. Where are those areas? And what are the plans? And how can we fix missing middle impacts? At Monday's Planning Commission meeting, a land use attorney told the commission that the tree canopy add-on in the missing middle plan might be illegal, and the board should get an advisory opinion for the Virginia Attorney General. That's a pretty important caution. Susan Land, who's here tonight from ATAG, showed the commission how only 1 or 2 missing middle types even come close to the 20% canopy goal, meaning that the rest are falling short. Bill Richardson of Donaldson Run talked about the need to stop large lot home coverage for single family homes. And Josh Handler talked about going to 30% lot coverage. These are the realists, and we need action on their ideas. I hope you also listen to Ms. Haynes at the ZOCO meeting on December 30th. She made a very impassioned case for trees based on your letter. And to all the speakers at this week's Planning Commission meeting, many of whom spoke about trees. And I hope you will lead us back to the strategic dialogue that we need so desperately. If missing middle doesn't offer an opportunity, I fear nothing will. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments and your suggested reading. Next up would be Mary Glass, followed by Susan Land. Ms. Glass?
Okay, can you see my graphic?
Yes,
Yes.
we have it.
Okay, very good. First of all, I want to wish happy holidays to all of the members of this commission. It's been great working with you for the last year, and I look forward to 2023 with all of you. But what I want to do tonight is give you a heads up. Very exciting that the preliminary results from a new independent tree canopy study are available, and more detail will be available early in 2023. What this has been done by a nationally recognized consulting firm that has done many of these. And so I think it's very important as you go into 2023 and are talking about your plans that you have some good up-to-date data. So this was based on not only NAEP data, but also on LiDAR imaging. And what it came up with is quite different from the basis on which we're doing things like missing middle and the tree canopy plan for the next 10 years. And what it shows is that the tree canopy itself is only 31%, not 40%, and that 5% is shrubs. But also importantly, 41% is impervious surface. And all of this just, is so critical to what we're doing in forests and natural resources that I think it's something that we really have to take into account and sort of stop and pause and say, are the strategies we're trying to come up with appropriate given what we now know? Now, there are going to be many overlays that are going to be available, including potential planting areas. It'll be divided up by neighborhood, watershed, census block, and public versus private ownership. And all of this is being refined and improved. This is really significant. The county should have done this before they spent $400,000 on consultants to write the plan. This costs a very small fraction of that, and the results are great. Also, in the future, if people wanted to, they can focus in on a neighborhood or a particular watershed to look at the potential. So in summary, I would like to see you reflect this kind of hard, good, recent data in your 2023 plans. And also you have the stormwater utility coming up. And that's something that other cities have looked at and decided to allocate a specific amount every year from that to forestry and natural resources as green infrastructure that can be used to meet the stormwater goals. I encourage you to repeat your concerns about the missing middle and the plan to the board, and request a pause in the writing of the plan so that we can evaluate it. Thanks, Phil.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate your comments. There we go. And so next up will be Susan Land. Ms. Land, you have the form.
Okay. I did send some slides to you. Vincent, do you mind putting those up? Is that possible?
Yeah, I can pull those up. Let me pull those up. All right. Here we go. Is this these are the slides you were talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
That's it. So I did a public comment, as Ann mentioned, on Monday night at the Planning Commission meeting. And I presented 3 issues. The first 2, I think this group has already heard of. I think in fact, I think I presented it at last meeting, so we can sort of just go through those quickly. But just as a reminder, again, the 20% tree canopy remaining on single family single-family lots is still something that we think is at risk, and it would be better if we could get a legal opinion on that to make sure that can't be challenged when we go to this missing middle zoning. Next slide. And again, this is the calculations that we did as ATAG to try to figure out if the 1 tree per unit policy would result in something close to 20%. We came up with numbers that were about half of the scenarios came up with, we were about 10%. But Vincent, I know you all did maybe done some different numbers, and we might want to double check those. And I'd be happy to double check these with you. Make sure we're accurate. But no, issue number 3 is what I wanted to bring up with this group. So that's the next slide. The 1 tree per unit policy, it's not really based on available lot space. As we understand it, the missing middle buildings will be the same size and have the same lot coverage and setbacks, whether they are an 8-plex or a duplex or a 4-plex. So the question is, if the county can require 8 trees for an 8-plex, isn't there any way they can also require 8 trees for a duplex? So that's the question that I would like to leave with this committee and see if that's something that we can get answered. And if so, maybe we can push that. That would get us closer to our 20% that we have today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your comments, and I know we're going to be discussing the missing middle at a point later this evening as well, since we had a couple of people participating in the hearings. So thank you all very much, and you're certainly welcome to stay and observe and participate, or you're welcome to do something that might be more fun. But thank you for caring about natural resources and trees and the future of our county. It's important. Now, next item on the agenda is to learn the latest on the stormwater utility program, and Eileen Winquist is going to be filling us in on that. It's nice to have you here tonight. And I think you may be muted.
Yep, I'm there. I was trying to share slides and wasn't focused on unmuting myself. So thanks, everyone. We do have a short presentation we wanted to run through just so everyone has kind of a good baseline. I know some of you may be more familiar with the utility than others. And then I know you may have particular interest in the credit program and some of the natural resource implications there. So we did want to talk a little bit of, more of a focus on that. I know a lot of you folks on the line here, but my name is Eileen Winquist. I'm with Environmental Services, and I work on our stormwater program, doing communications and engagement. I also have Krista Abel here, who is works on our budget and capital projects, and she's kind of one of the key project managers for the stormwater utility. So she will be helping answer questions as well. So I'm going to kind of go quickly, but then feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll leave some time for questions as well. So let's see. So just a little background. What is a stormwater utility? So currently our stormwater program is funded through a sanitary district tax, and a stormwater utility would just be an alternate way to pay for the county's stormwater management program. And so a utility is based on the amount of hard surfaces or impervious area on a property, while the sanitary district tax is based on a property's assessed value. So it's just a different way to calculate that. So it's more similar to other types of utility bills, where it would be, more similar to a user fee based on the use and sort of impact of the property on the county's stormwater system, using the impervious area as that measure. And so the impervious cover on a property is much better correlated with the amount of stormwater runoff than the property assessment. There's really no correlation with the property assessment and the amount of runoff. So just to give everyone a little background on that. How did we get to this point in this process? So currently we've been working actually kind of assessing and studying the feasibility of converting to a stormwater utility for a couple of years. There's been actually a lot of work prior to this. We have a consultant, Reftelis, who specializes in developing stormwater utilities around the country. They led a feasibility study that was completed in May of 2020. that recommended the county, make this change to the stormwater utility. And then we have further, done further analysis and assessment looking at how the rate would be structured, and then been reporting back to the county board, through this process. And so they have continued to direct staff, to move forward with this. And so currently we have been doing over the past year engagement and moving towards the implementation of the stormwater utility. So just to give a little background, some folks have had questions, about what they pay now under the current system versus what they might pay under a stormwater utility. So just to give you that background, the average, if using sort of a property that has an assessment of 800,000, the current charge would be about $136 per year. So you can kind of figure that, maybe $10 or $12 per month, and that's based on the current fee, which is the sanitary district tax. So then again, moving, looking at the stormwater utility, that would be based on impervious area. And this slide just illustrates, what areas on a lot would be considered impervious. It's just any portion of a property that's covered with hard surfaces and doesn't let water soak into the ground, including your patios, roofs, driveways, and walkways. So properties with more impervious area would pay a higher fee under a stormwater utility. So why is the county considering changing to a stormwater utility? This, here we talk about some of the reasons why, and it's really, part of it is to try to create more of use more of a demand-based fee. It's where the fee would actually be more related to the demand that the property is putting on the system, with the impervious area, and really trying to create a fair basis for funding with the current funding mechanism. The use based on the property assessment really is not correlated at all with the amount of runoff. So it's really trying to connect that fee more to the actual impact that the property has on the system. Okay. So what is paid for with the stormwater utility and what's also paid for under the current system with the sanitary district tax. And so it really pays for the, overall stormwater program that the county has, which involves maintenance of a lot of our storm system pipe, including thousands of infrastructure elements, culverts, inlets, outlets, those sorts of things. Upgrades to those systems, to improve the system, and also, the focus we have recently with trying to increase capacity and respond, to flooding impacts and reduce our flood risk. We also have regulatory requirements, with FEMA floodplains and our resource protection areas. And again, through our permit we have with the state, to reduce pollution. So we do a number of projects, green streets and stream resilience projects and pond projects, to try to reduce pollution and meet those goals. So, and then in addition, education training. So there's a whole breadth of programs, in the stormwater management program that the funding is used for. So just to give you a little background, how would the utility work? So the impervious area is measured using our mapping system data, and that's used to calculate a square footage of impervious area for a property. So for a consultant has kind of analyzed, a sampling of properties and found that the average impervious area for a lot of the residential properties is about 2,400 square feet for, in Arlington County. So that becomes sort of the billing unit, which is one equivalent residential unit. And so that's, again, the median amount specific for Arlington. So then each property is charged based on the number of ERUs that they have on the property. So we do have another slide that talks a little bit more, actually the next one, about the rate structure. We won't get into a lot of detail on this, but we do have, some information here. So for single family residential, there would be 4 tiers of the rate structure based again on these kind of groupings, of impervious area. So there would be a lower tier, less than 1,600 square feet, which would be charged 0.6 ERUs. And then another category between 1,600 to 3,600 that would be charged 1 ERU. Now, most of the single-family homes in Arlington, about 90% fall into this Tier 1 and Tier 2 category. So we do have some distribution graphs as well, if, in some of our other presentations, if you're interested. Some properties that have more than that would be in Tier 3 at 1.7, and then for a very small number of properties that have a larger amount, they would then be charged per ERU. For multifamily properties, we have decided instead to do a flat rate, and so we can talk a little bit more about that if folks are interested. And then for non-residential, which would be commercial and other types of institutional properties, those would be charged basically based on the impervious area per ERU as well. So we have been doing engagement over the past year, and you may have seen some of the information or participated in the feedback form. We also had an open house this summer, and we had a stormwater utility advisory group that we had met with several times over the basically since March. We met with them about 5 times, and they were very helpful and provided a lot of great feedback as we were looking at options for the rate structure and also developing the credit program. So to dive into the credit program a little bit, under state code, we are required to offer a credit program. And so we do have some kind of goals here for the credit program. We want to promote, awareness and voluntary measures, to reduce runoff. We want to support water quality, but we also need to keep in mind that the main focus of the stormwater utility is really to fund the stormwater program. So we do not want to create a credit program that is so complex and difficult to administer that it requires multiple staff in order to manage the program. So that is something that we're trying to balance, but we do also want to reward positive behavior. So those are just some things to keep in mind as we talk about the draft here of the options. So this slide has a lot of information on it, but it kind of gives you a summary. You can see the top box here looks at the credits for single family, and then multifamily and non-residential are the lower box. So just to provide some information, we do and we will provide credits for both mandatory facilities. Those are facilities that are installed as a result of a development project. And so if someone redevelops their home or builds a new home and they have stormwater planters or a pervious driveway, they would receive a credit for those. And that again is something that is required through the state law. But then in addition, there would be credits available for voluntary actions that someone chooses to take, of their own volition. And so we have things like conservation landscaping, tree planting, rainwater collection, rain gardens, and permeable driveways available. And we have different levels of credit you can see for those. And then under the multifamily and non-residential, we also have, in addition, some volunteer activities. And this was something that we heard, very importantly from some of our tax exempt customers, and some of those folks, this will be more of a change for some of those customers because they have currently not been paying under the sanitary district tax. So changing to a utility, this would be a new fee for them. So that was something we heard through our advisory committee that was very important to have those options available in the credit program. So, I'm almost done. I don't know if that was a timer or not.
No.
So again, I just wanted to highlight some of the natural resource related credits. These again would be things for larger property owners, businesses and churches, to do in addition to homeowners, rain gardens, conservation landscaping, rainwater collection, tree planting, stream cleanups, and invasive plant removals. So those are some of the options we have there. If you have not seen the fee estimator for the stormwater utility, the link is here, and I did send Vincent the slides, so please feel free to look that up, and we can probably put it in the chat as well as we go. And basically, you can check out your property and see what your estimated fee would be under the proposed stormwater utility. In terms of next steps, there is a possibility that we will have a work session with the county board in January. Staff has been working basically over the past year and has made a lot of progress and has a lot of recommendations, and would like to share those with the county board, and also a lot of feedback from the engagement process. So we are working to schedule that, but then the utility would also be included as part of the FY24 budget. And so we'll go through the budget hearings in February, March, and April when they would be voting on that. So those are the upcoming participation options there for that. So, and again, we have our webpage here and my email information there. And you can also sign up for updates on the website. So I will stop. I don't know how I was doing on time there, but I will go ahead and stop, and feel free to raise your hand, or if we have questions in the chat, we can look at those. So,
well, thank you very much. Why don't we'll open up to questions from the commissioner. You can raise your hand, and then we'll call on you, but I'm sure we have questions on this new program.
Let me see, I'll go ahead and stop sharing. Okay, Noreen.
Okay, Noreen, your hand is up.
Yeah, hi. Hi, Eileen. I was just wondering, how are you going to assess or monitor or whatever the things like rain gardens and tree plantings and so forth, for individual homes?
Sure.
I have another question too about tree plantings. Is that just new trees that you plant, or is it existing trees on your property?
Okay, those are great questions, and that actually is again part of this critical effort that we were making in developing the credit program. We wanted to make sure that it was meaningful, but also trying again to minimize the administration and sort of paperwork and that kind of aspect to it. So we have developed a way for people to submit photographs and some minimal documentation of their rain garden or other facilities. And so, if they have some photos of kind of the process of it being installed, and also or information about how they how they did that. We do have a draft manual that we will be sharing, fairly soon that has, more details there. So we will ask for some documentation, but a lot of it people will be able to submit electronically. So there won't be, hopefully, a real detailed process there. And currently on the tree question, we do have a credit at this time for new tree planting. And so that's something, and it depends, the number of trees depends on the type of property. And so that again will be, detailed in the credit manual.
Do you get credit for trees you already have, mature trees?
That's something that we had discussed. Right now, we do not have a credit for mature trees in the draft credit program. So, but that, again, we were trying to balance, the administration of the program and documentation. So I think that's something that our team had discussed as a possibility. So Chris, I don't know if you want to jump in on that, but.
Yeah, as Eileen said, we looked at both the mature, because we know City of Alexandria just included that with their revamped credit program. But at this point, the administrative burden is just too great for us to be able to balance that out amongst the program. But it may be something that we look at in the future. And I would like to say thank you to Vincent, who was very good and helped out with our tree planting criteria and guidelines. So we appreciate his wise counsel on that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Josh, what's your question?
There we go, unmuted, right? Very good.
Mm-hmm.
And sorry, I had to step out for a minute, so maybe you already answered this question, but on this general theme of stormwater reduction and runoff, do you have any information about the discussion over the summer? I think the planning division was asked at the county board during the budget commission meeting or the budget meetings in the spring
Sure,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the stormwater utility is really a separate process from that. I think if the board chose to take up lot coverage, I mean, again, that would, that is usually kind of a significant process when that is, kind of revisited. I know they looked at it back in 2005, and made some changes at that time. But again, that's kind of a larger community conversation. So that would not be affected by the stormwater utility. This is really sort of looking at, the actual measures on the lot, but not what the controls are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. I appreciate they're kind of separate, but just thought you might have some information since they are interrelated. And then probably then my question being more specific, and if you haven't answered this, why did you end up choosing the tiers rather than, since you have fairly precise measurements, just go for something that's more square footage or every 100 square feet? Because it seems a pretty wide band, and so people are going to have an incentive to obviously not necessarily go down to the bottom of the band, but stick at the top. Thanks.
Sure.
So I'll go ahead and take this, Eileen. So when our consultant Raftellus was doing the initial feasibility work, they looked at multiple methods for setting the residential. And one of the reasons why we chose the tiering was for ease of administration. When you start getting down to hundreds of square feet per billing unit, things can swing wildly from year to year. And it requires, I think, a much higher level of precision than our GIS, than we were comfortable with. And you would be having to basically rework your whole list every year instead of looking for areas of change. So our consultant did look at it, but their recommendation was the residential tiering. And they did look specifically at Arlington. They did the sampling of residential properties to determine our equivalent residential unit at 2,400 square feet.
Well, can I have one more follow-up on this, Phil, or we got other people in line?
Well, let's let other people go, then
Okay,
you
go
can come
please,
back
and
if we
I'll
still
return
have
if we
time.
got time. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. David, what's your question?
Two quick ones. One is, have you gotten yet to the point where you're thinking of an exact frequency for the survey? You're talking about, Krista, a minute ago, you said, well, there's an administrative issue and you might have to do it every year. Well, we're talking about multiple millions of dollars of revenue. So it seems to me that some of the administrative steps in order to do this the best it can be done would be minor compared to the revenue that is involved here. So I'm wondering what kind of a expenditure you're thinking, and one of the things that translates into is the the frequency of the survey itself.
So we will be using both our current GIS contracts, which we utilize the state aerial imagery, but then we're also procuring a new imagery service, and that will be on an annual basis. Actually, the one we're procuring does it 3 times per year, but only really one will be for our purposes, but the 3 times gives us lots of coverage. But no, I mean, we will be reviewing the GIS annually, looking at that annually, but it does create a higher administrative burden when you're assessing each of the residential units on a smaller or more precise basis rather than doing the tiers.
Sure. No, I understand. I'm also wondering whether the survey type that you're talking about is a survey that could also be used for measuring tree canopy.
I am not an expert on GIS. I'm a financial person, but we have been involving all of the other county departments in looking at and demoing this new aerial imagery. So not only for DPR, but then also for public safety and other areas
Right.
too.
Okay.
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
have a really quick answer to that. Most of the time impervious studies are done leaf off, so people can see the underlying impervious area, and that is the worst time to do a tree canopy study, so it doesn't necessarily work together.
Okay. I'm looking for a way to pay for the tree canopy study with the stormwater fee. Okay, sorry, one real quick other thing, just your point about the commercial, the fee schedules for commercial. I think if I'm correct, these are in the opposite situation as churches and other nonprofits where they have a lot of land and have not paid. Well, in the case of the commercial, they're paying right now by value, real estate property value. That most of these are going to actually probably see a reduction. And so how's that going to work? Is it just going to be, they're just going to pay less? Or are you going to scale it down in a way to offset the scale up of the nonprofits? Or how is there any grandfathering? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, under state code, there's nothing we can do based on the type of use a place of worship or nonprofit is placing on the property. It's solely based on your customer class or what the property looks like. So we couldn't charge places of worship a different rate than we charge JBG or one of those big commercial properties. So it's all based on the type of property. There's really nothing we can do because of state code. I know there was a point that I wanted to make. So earlier in the first part of the conversation, you said many of the high rises will actually see their rates decrease, what they're paying decrease from when it was based on the sanitary district tax, because there really is no correlation between assessments and usage of the stormwater infrastructure. So they will see a decrease on their properties, while the formerly tax exempt properties, real estate tax exempt properties, will see that increase based on the usage.
Yeah, is there any way to ensure that they pass those decreases on to the residents?
No, actually, there is no way for us to do that. The county doesn't regulate any of that.
Okay. Well, I just want to say in finishing, because I know other people might want to ask, that I agree with Josh's original question about the bands, the three categories. I think they could be much more refined and still not be administratively difficult, and I think it could actually make a material difference to the effect of this.
Okay,
all right.
Thanks for your comment.
Thank you, David. Let's go to Carolyn. Your hand is up. What's your question?
Hi, Eileen. Nice to see you. Thank you. And I've been participating in a couple other presentations that Eileen has done. So a couple questions. I'm sorry, I'm toggling back and forth between Planning Commission on the missing middle housing. So I may have missed this already, but on the with the nonprofits in particular and the houses of worship and stuff, is there going to be a phase in for that? Did you talk about that at all? Because I know it impacts their budget dramatically, and a lot of the discussion was that you're essentially taking money that would have otherwise gone to outreach in the community and putting it into the stormwater utility fee instead. So what's the latest on that concept?
Sure. Yeah. I think we will be, when we'll be presenting to the board, the staff does have some recommendations for that again, but it'll be the board's, final decision. But that is something that, we wanted to emphasize with the board, and definitely a message that we heard, from the faith organizations and the nonprofits about, preferring some additional time, for the implementation and that. So unfortunately, we as staff can't make that final decision. So we do want to carry that message forward, and then, but we haven't had the work session as of yet. And so, we will be, definitely presenting that message to the board when we meet with them.
Okay, thanks. It's a significant issue, so I know,
Mhm.
I'm hearing that you
Sure.
understand that as well. I'm also
Yep.
concerned too that on the credit program, I know Arlington's is not nearly as generous as some of our neighboring jurisdictions. And, sort of to David's point, we're going to get a lot of money out of this. And, shouldn't we be a lot more creative both on the monitoring and, being more creative on the credit programs too? It just seems like, we're trying to encourage people to do conservation landscaping and, possibly grandfathering some of those in and some of that kind of stuff. I just feel like we're not
Mhm.
being very creative in this at all.
Sure. We did also hear, that message about, the percentages allowed, and we're at this point recommending up to about a 35%, total cap. One thing that is unique with Arlington's program is because we have those mandatory credits. We do have to provide for those mandatory credits for any project installed as part of a redevelopment. Arlington, does require stormwater facilities for new homes and additions. And so we are somewhat unique, in that. And so we already have kind of in place several thousand of these stormwater facilities that will automatically get that credit. So our credit program kind of at the very beginning is going to be much larger than some of our other local jurisdictions. So that's just
But it's
something that
based on
we,
construction. It's not based on what people are actually doing on their property. It's a very minor credit for what people are actually doing on their property. And in my mind, it feels imbalanced because we know we're going to get that, through LDA 2.0. So, it feels like we could be doing a lot more and being a lot more creative. This feels
Sure.
way too narrow for me.
Okay. Yep. I mean,
Anyway.
we definitely hear that, but I think another important thing to keep in mind is kind of the intent of the utility is really, to fund the stormwater management program. So it would be different if you were purely designing an incentive program or something, separate, but again, the main purpose of the stormwater utility is, to fund the stormwater program, with the credit program being a component of that.
I get that, but I think
Yeah.
we're missing a huge opportunity. If, when we look at it so narrowly through just that lens, I think we're just, from a community-wide perspective, that's a way too narrow of a perspective. So anyway, thank you.
Okay. No, I appreciate your feedback.
Yeah,
so.
one thing I'll add on to that, the larger we make our credit program, the more revenue we're foregoing, we'll have to increase the rate for everyone else to make up that revenue.
But
And so that
But that's a good thing though, because then you're
isn't
doing it
that
for the
the whole
right
point?
reasons. So again,
that
I
would
think you all
tend
are
to
looking at it.
impact our lower income property owners more adversely than our more affluent property owners. So it's
Not
just
necessarily.
an equity balance.
Anyway, I would love to see the numbers on that because I'm not sure that would necessarily pan out, but it'd be interesting to see the numbers.
Thank you.
Okay, Melody, you have a question?
Yes, I do. Do you see my hand going up and down?
Yes.
Thank you so much, because I'm not sure if I missed this or even how to ask the question, but what you were just saying about our lower income people being affected in a different way. I'm always concerned about demographics and looking at North Arlington versus South Arlington. Did you look at the demographics and if people of color would be more or less affected?
We did do a lot of heat maps with showing kind of what the change would be for each of the different households. And that was part of our presentation to the county board as well. And also, I will say one of the reasons that we do have the multifamily rate structure option, the 0.18 per unit, is to mitigate some of the impacts to the affordable housing and the garden apartments. So we specifically, that was part of our phase 2A, the additional feasibility work, was to see what can we do to mitigate some of those impacts for some of the more sprawling, more horizontal properties in Arlington.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your question.
Okay, I see three hands that are either left up inadvertently or they have another question. Noreen, David, and Josh. I know Josh had another question which he postponed, so I'm going to call on him first. And Noreen and David, just let me know if you're actually waiting to ask another question. Josh?
Yes, thank you. And Again, sorry if I missed this. This very interesting presentation. You're going to raise more money through this as compared to the current system, and kind of related to Melody's question, who is going to see their rate go up and rate go down then? So whatever I've been paying for the decade or so I've been living in Arlington is suddenly going to be twice as much. And then back to Carolyn's question, we actually want a quicker subsidy of mitigating things, so I can plant a few trees quickly or repave my driveway with pervious pavers so I can bring the cost down. How do these factors play out, particularly the revenue issue? Are you gonna get more or less, or what's going to happen here?
So as Eileen said earlier, this is a cost recovery program. So we base the rate on what amount of money we need to generate to do our stormwater management program. So we have a couple kind of complicating factors. With the recent referenda to issue bonds for the stormwater program to increase the amount of capital projects we're doing, that necessitates the rate going up, whether we stayed on the sanitary district tax or if we move to a utility. The rate of that debt. So it's going to generate more because we need to pay for more debt service. If everything was remaining equal, like, it would not generate more money. But because our budget has to go up to support that debt service, it will generate more funds.
So
the burden
scale
is
it to pay for that. Okay.
Yeah. So as we start to issue the debt that was authorized from the citizens on the last two referenda, that debt service will start to hit the budget. So we'll see. We saw debt service in the FY22 budget and then FY23. And as we start to issue more and more debt, the rates will increase to support that. And we've been transparent about that from the beginning. I think that's one of the big messages that Mr. Schwartz put out to both the county board, and we tried to communicate that out to all the voters, is with this increased CIP program, it means it'll cost more. We have to issue debt. We have to support that debt. All the debt is funded through the stormwater program. So all of the fees, whether it's taxes or user fees, go toward the debt service.
Thanks very much for that. Very interesting fairness question then, in terms of those of us that are living in a dwelling we purchased 10 or 12 years ago and really have not expanded anything. Well, we built a shed, so guilty as charged. But those in other parts of Arlington that have not done those things, then we've piled on this debt to account for building that's been done in the last 10 or 15 years that we're now all paying for. A lot of that has come from greater size houses, as well as whatever's been paved in the development corridor. So yeah, I think Melody's onto something in a very interesting way, not only in terms of people of color, if you will, but in lower income, but just a fairness issue.
Well,
in terms of
in
recent
the past,
construction, increase of flooding versus you haven't been in your house for 20 or 30 years, and suddenly now you're paying for it all.
I think a lot of our system improvements really are, for dealing with, wider scale flooding impacts. So I know there's always a lot of concern with redevelopment and impacts from that. But, the type of flooding that we're seeing, is more watershed scale. It's really a broader system, type of issue versus kind of the more lot to lot impacts from redevelopment. So, and again, as we, since 2014, we have required stormwater management facilities for any redevelopment project. So any new impervious that is created with a redevelopment, they do have to install, pervious driveways, planters, other things to manage that. So, but a lot of the CIP funding that Krista is referring to is really going towards, larger scale system improvements versus, kind of more of the impacts from smaller redevelopment projects.
Okay, I'll think about that for a minute. Thanks very much. Very interesting.
Sure. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I know we're a little bit over our time allotment.
Yeah, and David, do you have a question? And if so, can you make it a brief one?
Very brief. Mostly I have a question because I couldn't figure out how to turn off the hand because my screen is different than it's ever been for Microsoft Teams. But anyway, so I think that maybe this project has been a little bit miscast, in my view, as being a revenue recovery, a fee recovery program to pay off debt, as opposed to an opportunity to generate a solution-driven initiative to deal with stormwater that eventually, over time, might actually reduce the amount of gray infrastructure we have to create. I just think that we need to have a broader view, and all of this issue of cost boils down to, what's the definition of cost? And if you want to have a couple $1 million of costs that involve staff and training and public education and a variety of other things as part of this, that ultimately benefits the overall stormwater system. So I just think it's defined a little bit too narrowly. And I'd like to see, before we get so far along that you can't change anything in the approach, I'd just like to see a little bit more flexibility. And that also goes back to Josh's point. It means that you have to have the beneficial results of that flexibility by passing it on to individuals who are making more responsible decisions on their own property. If I can figure out how to put down my hand, I will, but otherwise I don't have anything else to say.
Okay. Thanks for your comment, David. We appreciate it.
Thank you. And I am just going to comment briefly myself. I'm disturbed that this program does not offer any incentive to keep large old trees, large canopy trees on properties. In fact, the incentive is to cut it down and plant 2 or 3 small ones, which will produce real stormwater reduction 20 years down the path. So if we're doing this change, I'm not sure why we're not building in incentives to protect and preserve our existing tree canopy, as well as these incentives to plant little rain gardens and things like that, which have nowhere near the same impact from a stormwater reduction process. I think that I understand that you're trying to get funds to pay the debt, which is for a critical thing for us to have a water system, stormwater system that works for the entire community. But we should be taking the steps to protect in other ways by maintaining what's there, as well as just on new plantings. And so you don't need to respond. I know you're doing what you can with what your charge is, but I hope that this will be addressed at another level before it's too late. I want to thank you both, Eileen and Krista, for coming tonight. It was very informative. And I know I did not know much about this, and I'm pleased that you took the time to share it with us. So thank you very much. You're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting, or you're welcome to do something that might be more palatable. So again,
thanks for having us.
Thank you. Yeah,
appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks for having us and for all your great questions.
Okay, for the commissioners, we have another guest speaker. So I'm going to suggest we go to that, and then we can talk afterwards if we're going to, what action we might want to take to express our views on the stormwater plan as has been explained to us tonight. So if you all will go along with me on that one, I'd like to introduce Paul Gilbert, the Executive Director of Nova Parks, to talk to us about their what's going on in the parks and their new strategic plan. So Paul, are you, after patiently waiting, are you ready to join us?
I am absolutely ready to join you. And I'm uploading the presentation as we speak, which hopefully will pop up here. Looks like it's getting ready. Great, excellent. All right, well, thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to this group. As luck would have it, Tuesday night, I got to give the same presentation to the Park and Rec Commission. So you'll find this presentation straddles both issues, because our agency straddles both issues of recreation and natural resource protection. And does that work when I advance it that way?
Yeah.
You see it? Okay, great. Yeah. Wonderful. Great. So a little bit about Nova Parks. We are a regional park agency. We have 3 counties and 3 cities that are member jurisdictions. We've been around for 63 years. Arlington was one of the founding jurisdictions, along with the City of Falls Church and Fairfax County. We currently have 35 regional parks and over 12,000 acres of parkland, and we're growing that all the time. We do a strategic plan every 5 years that really is the guiding principles of what drives our actions over the coming years. A little bit about some of the high level users. Our number one user base are trails. We have over 100 miles of trails, the WNOD being the biggest piece of that, 45 miles, and 2 to 3 million users. This time of year is one of our biggest seasons because we have 3 light shows at Bull Run, Meadowlark, and Cameron Run, and collectively about 400,000 people do those light shows. They are all LED light shows. We have 5 water parks, about 300,000 users there, and we have 3 golf courses, about 100,000 rounds collectively. So we did a strategic plan over the last year or so, and we adopted it in September. We worked to get a lot of good public feedback on the plan, and we made the environment the first pillar of the plan. So our pillars are environment, belonging, building the future, our team, and revenue and efficiency. Belonging is really equity and inclusion. And you can see in our polling for this, 92% thought that our plan was important or very important, and particularly the environment piece was extremely high. We put it online, had a survey, had 5 local newspaper articles, got lots of great feedback from our various partners, and I'm very excited about it. It's a bold plan that will move us forward. And now I'm going to just kind of hit a few of the things in the strategic plan that I think you'll be probably most interested in. No way I could go through it all in this time, but one of them is to complete the prescribed invasive species plan for Upton Hill, particularly also Occoquan. These are 2 parks that have a detailed plan that we're working on currently. And the photo that you see there, I'm extremely proud of because 2 years ago, that was filled with invasive plants, and really working with Arlington Master Naturalists, Nova Park staff and equipment, and a contract that we have with invasive plant control. We have really made such tremendous progress at Upton Hill. And I think it's extremely important process to do that, because you'll see in the blue writing there, I think in many areas we can expand our parkland, and we have continued to do that. But in our most urban areas, and we've just been talking about how much of Arlington County is impervious surface and how much is tree canopy, we don't have very many opportunities to acquire more land. But what we can do is take the land that we have and enhance its ecological value. And that comes down to invasive species removal. We are, in addition to Upton Hill, we're working with ARM at Potomac Overlook. We want to really accelerate some of our invasive species removals on the WNOD. And we have about $170,000 in money for invasive removal and habitat restoration, which is a great deal. Let's see. See, did I hit the next one? Yeah. So you will see Melody right there in that photo. Another part of our efforts are to really expand our nature outreach, and we are going to be putting more interpretive signs about habitats within our parks. We have a series of signs about forest succession that will educate the public about that. We've for about 2 years now, had a Black and Hispanic birding program based out of Upton Hill. That's a wonderful partnership with the Arlington NAACP, with the Arlington Master Naturalists, with Audubon, Society of Northern Virginia, and Nova Parks. And we want to take that model and expand it. We also want to identify areas where Title I schools are near our parks and do more outreach. The program that we did just last week on Thursday was at Upton Hill and was the Boys and Girls Club. These kids came out, had a fantastic experience and learned a great deal. And it's exactly the kind of thing that we want to do so that we're building the conservationists for tomorrow and really expanding the knowledge of these kids so that they can lead us in the future. A little bit about trees and natural resource banking. So in our strategic plan, we talk about natural resource banking. We got a lot of questions about what is that, and it's a relatively new issue and a term that many people aren't familiar with. But we are planning to plant over 50,000 trees in the next 5 years, which is very bold. We have been planting about 1,000 trees a year, so 50,000 is 10 times our normal rate of trees. This will be reforesting about 200 acres collectively in 4 or 5 different parks. These are parks that are outside of Arlington because they're areas where we have larger grassy areas that could be forested, that we can come in and really make a big impact. And while those reforestation efforts may be just outside of Arlington, they will benefit us all by filtering the air, helping groundwater, doing all the wonderful things that forests do, expanding habitat for wildlife. And the term natural resource banking includes a number of different things, which are carbon credits, nutrient credits. Nutrient credit is basically stormwater, wetland credits. We are currently working on nutrient credits. We're currently working on developing some carbon credits, and these will result in this 50,000 new trees. And while they may be called different things for different purposes, they all boil down to the same thing, which is restoring habitats and particularly restoring forests. So very excited to be in the forefront of this movement as we think about the climate crisis, which is the major crisis of our century. The answer is carbon sequestration, as well as reducing the carbon that we emit. And carbon sequestration happens through vegetation, and particularly trees. So we're excited to be taking a big step in that direction. In the area of reducing our carbon footprint, Nova Parks for years has been measuring all of our carbon uses. So whether we use a gallon of fuel or a kilowatt of energy or a therm of natural gas or whatever measurement it is, we take all of our energy use, measure it all, convert it all to carbon, and track it annually. And we award our facility that has reduced their carbon footprint by the highest percentage each year. We've done that for years. You can see the chart on the top. It is driven through efforts, but it also goes up and down because of climate. If we have a particularly cold winter or particularly hot summer, energy use goes up. If the weather's a little more moderate, it's easier to reduce that. But in our strategic plan, we have a number of new initiatives that relate to this. And it's the adoption of electric vehicles, adoption of electric mowers, EV charging stations, solar panels at more of our parks, so that we're taking a lead in these areas within the constraints of our budget, which is always constrained, We're going to be trying to put resources towards these things, demonstrate them, help the public understand them, and help move us in a positive direction. Just a little bit of bragging about the last 14 months. We've had a great last 14 months. We've acquired 2 new pieces of parkland. One is property on the Potomac River in Loudoun County, and the other one is the Winkler Botanical Preserve in Alexandria. That's a nearly 45-acre nature preserve that is right off of 395 and behind the Mark Center, and is almost certainly the largest undeveloped piece of land inside the Beltway in Virginia. And we were able to acquire both of those through gifts and grants, and it greatly expands our base of parkland. We've also unveiled 10 new interpretive signs that focus on diverse history, on Black history. The picture in the upper right you see was on the WNOD, where we unveiled last February a series of signs about segregation practices when the WNOD was a railroad. We have also unveiled 2 really innovative facilities. One is the dual trails in Falls Church, and the other one is Climb Upton at Upton Hill. So a little bit about dual trails. We got a lot of interest in that because our strategic plan says that we are going to pursue dual trails in Arlington, and we have a grant for the design. So there's no grant to build it, but there's a grant to help us do the design. We haven't started on that yet. We're still working on grant logistics and working all that out. But I can talk about what we did in Falls Church and talk a little bit about some of the constraints we can see in Arlington as we move forward. You just spent a lot of time talking about stormwater, and the revised dual trails in Falls Church addresses stormwater for the first time. The WNOD was as everyone knows, a rail bed. And in the 1980s, we put a strip of asphalt on it. And over time, that asphalt has grown as the trail's use has increased. But with the redesign, we sheeted all the asphalt to a swale that goes along the side. We have French drains in there. We have modular wetlands, which I'll explain in a second. We have the swales are filled with native grasses, pollinator plants. So it both enhances the biodiversity as well as handles stormwater. As you all know, the goal of stormwater is slow it down, filter it. And that's what we've designed. I think we were the first organization, public or private, in Northern Virginia to use this new technology called a modular wetland. And you see a picture of it at the bottom. It's a concrete structure that's buried underground at the surface, and it captures the water, runs it through a bunch of media that filters it, and has plants growing out at the top. From the surface, it just looks like not much, like a flower bed, but it does this task of capturing the water, slowing it down, filtering it, and releasing it more slowly. So we're excited about that. The Falls Church dual trails achieved a bunch of different things. We were able to remove a lot of invasive species. We were able to enhance the biodiversity through the plantings that are there, and we were able to address stormwater. So I think we've set a model that is a great model, and we need to figure out where and how we can apply this in Arlington. The picture at the top is a Falls Church section. The 2 pictures at the bottom are places in Arlington, and particularly the lower right, you can see that there are places along I-66 where there really is no room to expand. We have bridges, we have poles, we have all kinds of obstructions. In other areas, 4 Mile Run is just off the trail property. So we're going to have a lot of obstacles that we're going to have to figure out what to do with and how to design around. And in some places, we may not be able to achieve the goal, but the overall goal, and the goal I think is really worth thinking about, is that the WNOD is not just a weekend recreational resource anymore. It has over time become a major transportation network and a carbon-free transportation network. And that is fantastic. It gets back to the number one issue of our century is global climate change. If we can lean in and make the trail work better, that will help us address those issues. One of the things we're seeing is more conflicts of users between the intersections. It used to be all the accidents happened at intersections. Now pedestrians and cyclists are bumping into each other more and more. We've done traffic studies. Almost every intersection with the WNOD fails or is near failure just from a traffic study perspective. So it makes sense to, wherever we can, improve it so that we can get more capacity, so it's a better experience for everyone to use the trail. And it's an opportunity to get in there and design it so it filters our stormwater and enhances our biodiversity. There's been, there's those that don't like the idea. I mean, there is no plan yet on Arlington, so all people can oppose is the idea. Have talked a lot about trees. There are some trees, but because it's under the power lines, the trees are pretty minimum under the WNOD. And that's always been the case, because if a tree gets too big, Dominion will cut it down. So there are trees, and there are also a lot of invasives because it's a rail bed, and rail beds are filled with invasives everywhere. And there's an opportunity to go in there and really do some nice improvements while we're making this carbon-free transportation network. So I'm almost at the end. I want to give a shout out to Arlington Master Naturalists. They have done amazing work in partnering with us at our parks and helping us address invasive species. I'll end with this beautiful picture again, which looks so much better than it did 2 years ago. And I am hoping we can do a lot more efforts like this and see that kind of result. But happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much, Paul. We appreciate that. I'm sure that we've got a number of questions for you. I'll let everyone compose themselves for a moment or two. But I want to thank you for the partnership with Armin. From Armin's perspective, you've given us an opportunity to do the work we want to do in some wonderful parks, and I think it has been markedly successful, even though there's always a few bumps and things like that when tackling invasives, particularly. So hands up. Let's see. It looks like David and Josh have hands up. Josh, you're first. Question?
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Paul, for a very interesting presentation, and very glad to see you have now gotten into the invasive removals big time in Arlington. Enhanced ecological values by removing invasives. Great way to put it. And if I understood you correctly, it's $170,000 of your own money. That's
correct?
So that, as we understand, that's like more than what Arlington's doing per year, right, Phil? Based on the presentation we had a while back.
Yeah, Arlington's
more. So that's phenomenal.
100,000.
Yeah.
And that's region wide.
I understand that, but still a big commitment. So of course, the question related to that is, where is Potomac Overlook on the kind of agenda? Second, great to see you're trying to reduce the carbon footprint, and saw the list of electric vehicles, what have you, to substitute for gas-powered ones. Where is the electric leaf blower concept? Because I can tell you nothing spoils a morning walking up the hill as much as having those the gas leaf blowers roaring away. So I urge you to think about electric leaf blowers really quick, particularly in our urban environments. And then finally, on WND Trail, I think one of the key issues on trees is yes, there's smaller trees underneath the power line, some very beautiful ones in the spring that flower though, but it's the Brandy Moore Castle area that's straightening the trail, as was talked about earlier at the beginning of this, would involve cutting down mature trees there. And then second, the overall issue of, we already have a dual trail through most of that part of Arlington. There's your trail, so to speak, and then the one by Arlington County. So can we better manage those, preserve some trees, and avoid putting a road right next to 4 Mile Run? So sorry, 3 different kind of points there, but just there's kind of questions in all of them. Thanks very much.
Sure. I'd also like to give a shout out to Michael Nardolilli, who is one of our Arlington County representatives on the Nova Parks board, who has also joined us. So, and Josh, forgive me if I miss any part of your questions, but I'll take the last one first, which is the dual trails. Again, we haven't designed any of it yet. It is an idea. And so we will start the process once we get the grant lined up. And I think we're keenly aware that we want to do this in the most ecologically sensitive way we can. And I think our plan is we'll probably do like a very ballpark design, like a 30% design. So not the high detail, and then really shop it around and get a lot of public input, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to take it all the way to full detail and find that there's not an appetite for it. So we're gonna do enough that we can all look at it and think about it, and then we're gonna come back to your commission and to others in Arlington and get feedback and refine it as needed. You asked where Potomac Overlook was in our invasive species plan. I would say top of the list. I think we are very interested in tackling some of those areas. Again, as we think about it, there are places where we can acquire new land, and there are places where acquiring new land is much more difficult. And in those places where it's more difficult, recapturing land, restoring land is probably our best bet to essentially, it's almost equivalent to getting more land when you take it from a monoculture to a diverse habitat. So, yeah. And there was a third, and I
electric leaf blowers.
Electric leaf blowers, sure.
Particularly up in Hill Park, which is in this urban setting.
Yeah. So we have in our plan to add electric mowers. We have specifically, and we have a date, but we also say when commercially available. And I think what we're going to be doing is probably adding some battery powered electric devices, whether it's a blower or a weed whacker or that sort of thing, in our more urban parks that are smaller, and they work better there, where you only need to run it for an hour and then don't need to run it. There are places like the WNOD is a great example, where our maintenance crew starts on one end of the 45 miles and goes all the way to the end and then starts again, and they are mowing, weed whacking, blowing all day long, and we need to make sure that we have a tool that will do the job. So there may be some limitations initially because technology is catching up. Technology is getting better all the time. But there are parks where we don't need it. We don't need whatever it is running all day long, where an electric powered one can be used well.
Upton Hill. Thank you very much, Paul. Throw that out there. All right. Thanks very much for the presentation.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Josh, for your questions. Melody, what's your question?
It's more of a comment than a question. Hello, Paul. So
Hello,
good to
Melody.
see you again. I wanted all my fellow commissioners to know that Paul took time out of his busy schedule to join us at one of the nature programs and Black birder, Black and Hispanic, Latinx birder programs. We headed up to Neil last Thursday. And I really appreciate this plan and the emphasis that you have on making people of color feel welcome in the parks. That's what I hear more than anything in the parks from people of colors. I don't see anybody who looks like me, or I don't feel like this is a place that I am welcome to come. So thank you so much, Paul, for the emphasis that you're placing on making these parks available to and welcoming to everyone. Thank you so much.
Melanie, it is always such a pleasure to work with you. I will just share with everyone that Melanie reached out to me a few weeks back about our manager at Upton Hill, Evan McGregor, and said he is doing such a great job, and he's doing a great job in building these partnerships that are bringing in the Boys and Girls Club, doing the Black and Hispanic birding program. These are the partnerships with Arlington Master Naturalists, with Arlington NAACP, with Audubon Society. And because of her suggestion, we gave Evan the first of a series of awards that will be given that is called our Strategic Champion Award. And so I thank you for pointing that out, and appreciate all that you're doing to help us out.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, Steve Stockwell is next with a question.
Hey, Paul, thanks for the presentation. Kudos to you for your bold tree plan. A couple of questions though. On the WNOD, I ride the WNOD quite a bit, and I really like the dual trails that you implemented. But on the pedestrian trail, would it? I know you said the trails were permeable, but wouldn't it make more sense to make the pedestrian trails something like limestone chips or something other than asphalt? And the second question is, are there any you've outlined some problems with putting trees on the trail. What about putting in plants like milkweed that would be attracted to pollinators? And that leads to a third question. Is there any plan for systematically putting in sort of pollinator attractors throughout the parks? Thanks.
Yeah, great questions. So we have, and I could share with the commission after the meeting a list of the native grasses and shrubs and other things that we put in Falls Church. But adding milkweed and other pollinator plants is always good. We have pollinator plants, but you can never have too many. So that might be something that we can do even more of. You ask about the dual trails, and the actual asphalt most of it is non-permeable. There are some sections of permeable asphalt, and the reason is that the WNOD gets driven on by large utility trucks, particularly Dominion, and the permeable concrete and asphalt are structurally not very sound. So they work well where you're not going to have a heavy vehicle on it, but they collapse and break up where you put heavy vehicles. So we have sheeted everything. We put in these modular wetlands. We have some spots where we have permeable pavement where it's not going to be driven on by a truck, but most of it is impermeable, but it is designed with the stormwater in mind. So basically, while it's wider, the ecological footprint is much smaller than what's there today. And was there another question?
Yeah, well, I'm just talking about the pedestrian side.
Yes, the pedestrian side. Well, the folks
why make that asphalt?
One is that's popular to have it as asphalt, and we would like to keep pedestrians on the pedestrian side and cyclists on the cycling side. And if you don't pave it, then pedestrians go back to the cycling side. The other issue is if you use stone dust or gravel or anything like that, it's largely considered impervious because it compacts. So it looks more permeable, but it doesn't perform terribly well.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, Jim McGlone, what's your question?
Well, thank you. Thank you for the presentation, Paul. I actually read your, or at least the environmental part of the strategic plan before the meeting. And there were a couple of things that caught my attention. First of all, have you been reporting all of your tree plantings so they get credit at the state level for the Chesapeake Bay WIP 3 goals? And if not, we can talk offline about how to do that. The other thing,
so I'm happy to talk with you
okay,
later about that.
Also, you're talking about the nutrient bank. I don't know if you're aware, but the town of Purcellville has recently installed one. So you might talk with them about their experience in doing that, depending on where you are in your planning process. So if yours goes in, as far as I know, that'll be the second bank in Virginia that's using trees. And thirdly, and this is also for the commissioners, the Virginia Department of Forestry is using infrastructure money to set up and establish an invasive species program that I believe will have some funding to help do projects at the local level. Just, I think it was yesterday or the day before, we posted an invasive species specialist position to help administer those funds. So please be flexible in your thinking. There may be other money available to do more management on invasive species on the property.
That's fantastic news.
Okay.
One of the challenges with invasives, and you guys all know this, is it's not a once and done. Like these plants just keep coming back. So you have to do it and then keep after them.
Yeah. I'll send you an email. Maybe we can set up some time to talk about how Nova Parks and DOF can work together.
I'd love to do that, Jim. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Now, Kit Norland. Kit, you're up next with your question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Gilbert, for spending the evening with us. Back to the issue of leaves, seems like there's an increasing awareness that the noise, the air pollution that comes with the gas-powered leaf blowers is bad for the health of the workers, and as Josh points to, is really becoming a quality of life issue. There's also increasing recognition that the nutrients in leaves are actually best left on the ground, or at least pushed towards the tree trunks. Is Nova Parks looking at a sort of a fundamental reduction in this exercise that would then, save labor, pollution, energy? Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. We are always looking to where in our parks we can reduce the sort of manicured footprint. And if we can go to a no-mow area and let the grass grow, that's a great thing. If we can reforest an area, that's even better. So it's always a balance of what areas do we need kind of cleared out for recreational purposes, and what areas do we really not, and we could turn those back to nature. Because absolutely anywhere where we can scale that back, it's a good thing.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Nat, you're up next with your question.
Yes, I was wondering if you could talk about the Trail of Visitor Center, the WNOD the Trail Visitor Center, please?
Sure, absolutely. That is another big, bold idea with not a lot of detail. So the basic idea is we have this trail that is the most used trail in Virginia, one of the most used trails in the world, 2 to 3 million users a year. And wouldn't it be cool to have a place that people could kind of identify with this 45-mile trail? And so we have a property that we might consider doing it, that is in Loudoun County. We have also talked to some officials in the town of Vienna that have maybe a redevelopment opportunity, maybe not. So we're exploring some places. I don't think there's a spot in Arlington, and it's interesting because while we have 45 miles, it's one of the most developed 45-mile corridors anywhere, because essentially Northern Virginia grew up around it, because the railroad came in, and then all of the stops from Shirlington to, all the way to Purcellville, all the towns and cities and places developed because there was a railroad there and a stop. So there are very few places where there's a few acres of additional land. So our property is 100 feet wide in most places, and in most places there's not any additional land, which we would need to build that kind of a visitor center where people could stop, get information, get something to drink. Maybe there would be opportunities to rent bikes, or, we haven't really thought through all the things that could be there, but it could really give a sense of place to the trail that right now doesn't have a one focal point. So.
Thank you. That's great. Appreciate it.
Okay, I think those are all the questions. Other than I had a comment for you myself, Paul. First is, as you're working to plan the dual bike paths concept, and I think there's a golden opportunity here for you to be able to make that area underneath the power lines and where that whole area along the bike path to be a much more valuable natural habitat than it ever has been, or than it ever is likely to be again, unless there is a special effort by planting natural meadows in some of the areas and other plantings. But it can be touted as not just that we're making improvements with the stormwater management, and you documented that it's better by some percentage than it was before, even though the trail is wider and carries more capacity, but also the same claim that we will have, in fact, a much better, more diverse natural wildlife areas along that valuable bike path. And I think so it's a plus rather than a what are we trading off here. The other thing, I just want to thank you and give you kudos for making sure that there is a focus on Potomac Overlook Regional Park for the invasive management. It's a glorious park. It's one of the treasures in Arlington by size and its breadth of nature. And it's just is continually gotten to be overwhelmed by the invasives. And so I applaud you for recognizing the need to focus there as one of the earliest or earlier next projects.
Phil, if I could, I just comment on your comment.
Yeah.
The meadow one is a great one, because we all are talking a lot about forests, and they are vitally important. But as you all know, because you're natural resource experts, meadows is actually the most endangered habitat type in our area, because most places that have meadows are just prime for development. So if we could expand meadow habitat, it would be great for birds and great for a lot of species that don't have that today. So it'd be great.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked my suggestion. And I want to thank you, you and Michael both for coming tonight. You're always welcome to come to our meetings, especially when you're bringing us good news. We're going to go and move on to other items on the agenda. You can welcome to stay, of course, or you're welcome to move to do something different. But thanks for your time and your energy. And I'm sure we'll be talking soon.
Thank you so much for having us, and we look forward to coming back with when we get some early design work done.
Okay, thank you. And so now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to refocus us back. We've now had 2 presentations, and I just wanted to see what the desire is of the commission with regards to commenting or making recommendations on either as a reaction to either of these presentations. So let's first go back to the stormwater utility program. Is there any action that folks think that we should be taking in response to what we heard this evening from Eileen? Josh, your hand is up.
Yes, unfortunately, I see another letter in our lives, kind of combining Melody, David's, myself, and Caroline's comments that a little bit more refinement, or a couple of other comments I missed are needed in terms of incentives and so on. But I hesitate to say that because my time is kind of short in the next week or two. So I was trying to take some notes there, but I mean, I'm glad they're doing this, taking these steps, but needs a little more work.
I think I concur with that as well. Other comments to Josh's idea that we send a letter to address how they're contemplating structuring this fee recovery plan? John, your hand is up.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I just think we need to weigh in on the credits because, as you pointed out, we have every incentive to cut our trees and plant new ones, which is precisely the perverse incentive. So we need to really pressure them on that point.
Okay. Other comments? All right. So we have a quiet, a silent majority here that wants to us to send a letter. Is there someone who would raise her or his hand to do an initial draft of the letter, and then we would approve it at our January meeting? So there is some time since this month's meeting is at least 1 week earlier than typical. This is when I really would love to be able to like turn on people's cameras and look them in the eye and say, well, what have you done for us recently? And I know that the commissioners are busy with many things and many have been active. John, your hand is up.
Sure, I can do it.
Okay, thank you. Would someone like to at least, well, no, I think you understand it. Since we don't have to approve this now before the thing's drafted, we can look at a copy along the way and make comments and then approve it in January. So I don't think we don't need to vote for him to write it. We just need to vote to approve it when it's finalized. So thank you very much, John. I appreciate that. If folks have comments that they want John to consider, I would suggest that you feel free to send John an email, but he's heard the presentations just like all of us, so I believe we're probably coming from the same perspective. Kit, your hand is up.
Oh, yes, I will send John a note. I think the excellent comments by David and Caroline and Josh also pointed out a narrowness about through which they're looking at this issue, and hopefully in our letter we can urge them to see it in the broader context of challenges that are directly related. So I'll talk with John about that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we're agreed upon that. And now let's talk about what we just heard from Paul regarding Nova Parks and plans going forward. is there any, should we, other than having told, several of us having said we like elements of what he told us, is there any other action that we should take as a commission? Is anyone interested in having us send a letter regarding what we heard and what we liked about it? And maybe anything else we would have liked to have heard more?
Well, should I contribute here, Phil? Or-
Sure.
I think a letter commending them on the steps they've taken, particularly since some of these steps seem to have taken it partially by virtue of our urging on the removal of invasives, would be certainly a reasonable thing to do. And at least from my end, a couple of points I offered in terms of, yes, thanks for making this transition, if they can, away from gas powered to electric powered. I have some separate communications saying they're going to attempt this by 2024, but I think they could kind of do it in certain places and certain some equipment faster. So we might want to urge that. Realizing we may have different points of view on the WOD trail in the commission, I think we should at least draw on your point of please take steps to improve the wildlife habitat, if you will, or naturalize the area or create swales in any event, because that is needed. Regardless if they widen the trail. So that is certainly a fair point to make, I think, in general, and commend them on their effort to find meadow areas and this overall philosophy. If we can't expand the land, particularly in Arlington, let's figure out how to make the land used better, if you will. So at their parks in Arlington, Upton Hill Park has some meadow areas. We partially saw one in the photo he was displaying. Can small meadow environments be created there? So there'd be those kind of points that would be positive and urge more, if you will.
Okay.
So Phil?
Yes.
Do you mind? I'm having trouble with my Microsoft Teams.
I understand. Mine looks a little
Is it
different
right?
from usual too.
I think all these points are very good. I thought it was a good presentation, and there's a lot of positive things to take from the new strategic plan. But if the recipient of our letter is the county board, then making recommendations or giving responses to what Nova Parks is doing, I don't know whether we do that to the county board or what. And I think that actually, since in the next few months, we're probably going to see the beginning of the engagement on the trail, that we might want to keep these things in our pocket and include them as the introductory paragraphs to a letter that we send to the board about how the trail engagement is progressing and what the initial plan might want to have or need to be included or mitigated or whatever. In other words, I don't have a problem, I guess, sending a letter to Nova Parks to say, hey, these are good things. I don't know why we send, if we send it to the board, it's a different letter. That's all I'm saying. And my reaction is very positive to all of this, but I think this is a little bit different in the sense of precedent from what we did with a similar kind of letter for when we commented about APS including a budget line for trees, which was congratulatory and brief, but it was part of the county government still. And I'm not sure whether this is the same thing. So I'm just raising that as far as your sort of how you view our official communications.
Right. And in response to that, David, I would like to point out that we did send a rather strong letter to our county board about what we felt were shortcomings in how Nova Parks was managing the natural areas, and and commenting that they were not good stewards. We were worried that they were not good stewards of parkland in Arlington County. So I want to make sure that if this is a different situation or not, I don't think that we would not send a letter to Nova Parks. That's not what we do. We report to the county, but if we see that Nova Parks is putting is putting in steps that will make Arlington County better from a natural resource standpoint, I don't see why that would be a problem.
I don't think it's a problem to say we recognize the positive steps they've taken, but in terms of including in it recommendations for how Nova Parks does things, I'm not sure whether that's part of the same content, or at least we'd have to be careful how we wrote it.
Right, and that I do understand. This is not the same as us telling the Arlington County that there are these issues in Arlington County parks that the board should look into addressing. What 8, 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that the letter is more, we liked what we heard, and this is the kind of stewardship that Arlington would want for all property owners in the county.
That works.
Whatever the right phrasing is. It's not I don't think it's a long letter either. And probably it's not one where we would get into pointing out things that Nova Parks should do differently because he heard us, I think.
Yeah, that works. Yeah.
So if there is support for such a letter, is there someone willing to draft this relatively brief and probably essentially positive, pointing out good news to our county board about steps that Nova Parks is taking in its new strategic plan?
Well, if I can contribute here to kind of combine the two concepts in terms of the governance mechanism of Nova Parks. Yes, on the one hand, Paul has now heard directly from us, and one of Arlington County's representatives in Nova Parks was listening in, that it seems like we're within our preview to write to the county board in the fashion you two have described, with the kind of sense of our thoughts will be passed along to our representatives to Nova Parks. So yes, thank you for taking the good steps you've taken over these last many months or a couple of years. Thank you for putting the funds to the positive things. And then the couple of things where we're recommending, urging, or suggesting do more, those would be included in that letter as well, still brief. And I would hesitate, though, to kind of, I was going to say, link the W&D trail issue to the other two issues to delay such a letter versus just flagging what we understand the state of play at the moment in WOD and the kind of points we raised. Swales would be good. This kind of restoring Meadowland would be good. Looking forward to see what they come up with their plan as we get more into the details, but at least flag our thoughts at the moment so the county board and by kind of extension, our representatives to Nova Parks are aware of our commission's thinking on these topics.
Other thoughts?
I'd be happy to do that letter if you need a volunteer. I'll just be kind of between the holidays, not in the next week or so.
Well, one thing I think we should recognize before we start a letter like that is that they do not have money. Nova Parks does not have money budgeted, certainly, for reconstructing and naturalizing the sunny areas, the areas on either side of the actual trail along the W&OD railroad bed. They would have money if they get the grant for the improvements to the bicycle and pedestrian paths, because that's all part of that project. But if we're asking them to, if we're recommending that they do the improvements on their own now without having any knowledge of whether this, what they want, and I'm not saying I'm in favor of it, I don't think we can expect them reasonably to take action to do the swales and the meadows unless it's part of where they will have money to do it.
Well, Phil, I genuinely don't know. I think we kind of had a parallel conversation, whatever, when we wrote the letter 12 months or 24 months ago, I'm forgetting that we shouldn't get into giving them recommendations on budget or budgeting this or that. And then we have discovered they apparently can find $170,000 of their own money to do these things. So it's we don't have to urge spend money, do it rapidly, the sky is falling, but these are steps we're looking forward to them taking, kind of concept, and look into it further.
Okay, who else wants to weigh in one way or the other, or a third way? I don't know that we have a consensus, I guess, right now. I know, Josh, you offered to write the letter. There's a lot of quiet.
Could I just clarify that
Yes.
if we just write a congratulatory letter saying these are good initiatives, you know, and we look forward to working with them on common ground and all that, I'm okay with that. We've done that before. I'm not sure we're quite ready for recommendations to the county for things that they should be doing out of a context of a actual project proposal. But I'm not.
Well,
That's
are
more of
people
a
in
comfort
favor
level.
of them working on Potomac Overlook? Is that, I mean, it's just kind of like, please continue doing what you're doing and do more of it at Potomac Overlook.
Well, I would see that's the congratulatory part.
Oh, okay, sorry, then maybe.
Talking about recommendations for doing things different or reprioritizing their resources and that kind of thing, where it's sort of off of the plan that he's already said they're doing.
Well, it's kind of, you're replacing gas power with electric powers. We're looking forward to you doing that as fast as feasible. We're looking forward to the work on WNOD Trail to reduce water runoff. I mean, if that's all conceived as being congratulatory, fine. Then
I think that's okay. Let's see other opinions. Carolyn.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this is a big change from where they've been. And I think about, 10 years ago when we were trying to get them to do anything at Potomac Overlook other than, putting in a zip line or something. So, I mean, it could be just a positive, the focus on natural resources, because this has not been their forte for, in the past. And so simply focusing on that. And it's, one of the recommendations of the FNRP that we continue to partner with groups such as Nova Parks, so it could be something along those lines. But I wouldn't get into a whole lot of details other than that, just that we note that this is a change from where they've been, and it's a very positive change.
And we note that it's probably in direct response to our somewhat stiff letter that we sent to the county board 2 years ago about their issues we saw with their stewardship.
Yeah, and we could have noted that this is something we had identified. We feel like it's the first step towards being addressed, but I wouldn't say it's all yippee yet, because we don't know. We're just the front end of this, but seems to be a positive step in that direction, something along those lines.
Okay, Steve.
Yeah, I don't see why we. I mean, we can certainly do a positive letter at this point in a general fashion as you're discussing, but I don't see why we can't say this is the sort of thing that we would like to see, the meadows, the swales, and so forth, and go ahead and get it out there so that it's there for community discussion, so that when we actually come back with a recommendation letter in the future, we can refer to that and say this is the kind of thing that we mentioned and we would like to see done. And we don't have to make a formal recommendation to the board. We could just say this was our reaction, and then say the general stuff about how this is a change of position and we like the direction they're going.
Okay, thank you. Kit?
Yeah, I agree with the last couple of comments. This is such a wonderful and frankly too rare good news story, and it's very appropriate, I think, to do a little attaboy as well as point out directions. And I'm very impressed that he mentioned several times the #1 issue of our century. So clearly, Josh and I feel strongly about gas powered mowers, but they're really a bad thing in so many ways. So just outlining directions that we hope they will continue in addressing the #1 issue of our century. I think it's all good. Thank you.
Okay, Colt. And then we'll close this discussion after Colt. Colt, if you're talking, you must be muted.
Thank you. I'm at Upton Hill and Potomac Overlook frequently doing invasive removal actions, and I'm quite familiar with the level of support that we receive. And I would say that what we've heard is encouraging, but most of the effort has been on the volunteer side, and has been us providing a push for this action rather than, oh, let's make Potomac Overlook our number one objective. And even though I have heard this for the last month or so, we have seen increased willingness to provide staffing, but in terms of actual funding, we haven't seen it, and I don't know how that would work. So I'm not ready to clap hands on this yet, but I'm certainly ready to listen to what does it mean that they're willing to provide more support at Potomac Overlook. I haven't heard of it and I haven't seen it. They have provided some staff resources to support the volunteers, which is good, and it's good staff. But I'd like to actually see and hear what a plan would be. That's my thought.
Okay. So we have a range of opinions here, I would say. Some people wanting to go with this is good news. I want to make sure the board's aware of
I'm okay with
the
it.
new focus on stewardship, and we think it's very appropriate, versus one that's more pointed, more focused on let's not just fall over with glee at the first PowerPoint. Let's prove it to us, kind of a thing.
I'm cautiously optimistic.
And I'll tell you where I am. I'm opposed to that second letter. I don't think it's appropriate for us at this point to come down hard. I think that what we saw is a significant change in the world of Nova Parks as of 2 years ago, 4 years ago, 10 years ago, even 1 year ago. Now, how it plays out, I don't know. Is there any consensus for any kind of a letter?
Well,
yes, Josh.
All right, one final point is we should also include this issue of becoming more inclusive in the park and trying to get more people to the park. Because this kind of back and forth and the example of the climbing structure up in Hill, I remember talking to them 4 or 5 years ago when you're soliciting community input, since we have a large apartment complex next door where many people are Spanish speaking, did you do any outreach in Spanish? And none was done. So if there's been a change on that front for various people's experiences, we should also highlight that in the kind of tone that you just described, Phil. So that should be one of our points as well.
I think that's an excellent point.
Josh, thank you for saying that, so I don't have to be the one to constantly break up. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to ask if someone wants to try to write a letter based on what we've heard. There could even be 2 versions of it, because I think one is more congratulatory, or at least we have good news to share with the county on what we've heard today. And the other is more sounds good, but it needs to include more specifics on this, and this. Is there anyone who wants to try to write a letter?
I'm happy to do the former one, and the sense of also kind of like, good job, or have great expectations for the future out of you folks on these various issues we've just described, based on what we've seen in the change the last couple of years. But I'm happy to have other people take the pen too.
Anyone who wants to try to write this letter? Melody? Would you like to try to write a letter?
I hate to say this, I just don't have time right now. I am so swamped. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just know that you know Paul, and that's fine.
Phil, I'll take a stab at the congratulatory letter.
Okay.
I can work with you on it. I can work with somebody. I just can't take the lead.
So what I'll suggest is that we have 5 weeks roughly before our next meeting, might be even 6, I'm not sure. But there's a pretty long gap. So we would want to get a draft letter, and we could circulate it widely at least 2 weeks before, maybe 3 weeks before our January meeting, get input, and then so we can have a discussion where we're more focused on if any elements are missing from the letter that the majority wants, if there are elements in there that the majority is concerned about, whatever. We know what we're doing. Does that make sense? So, Noreen, thank you for stepping up. You got point.
Well, I would just say, I know Josh had said that he would do it before, so I don't mean to be stepping on him.
I think Josh
I'm going
is
on a
happy
week's
when
annual
you.
leave starting tomorrow. So if your
Yeah.
thoughts are fresh in your head and you're ready to go, please, I'm happy to pass.
Well,
the
not
baton.
really. I don't really have anything fresh in my head, but I know you've done more letters than I have. So, Melody, do you want to work together?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, that's great. Now, thank you all very much. Now we're going to move to two letters that, and I apologize for this being a long meeting, but it is, that's life. First, I want to turn to the 2022 year-end report and 2023 action plan. What I hope is the final draft was sent around a couple of days ago, which had incorporated feedback from the previous draft when, and so there were some changes, not overwhelming, but in some ways, part of it was structural, how the letter was is laid out, putting the report and the next year's work plan both in the document before the signature, because it always seemed as though some people never went past the signature page, so they never really saw the work plan. Did anyone have concerns or questions about that draft that was sent out on Tuesday?
Still, this is Kit. I'm sorry I was out of the country until recently, but I just had a handful of comments, and I know we don't have a lot of time. Something was taken out of the letter reviewing 2022 related to climate change and our efforts to review plans to address the crisis and collaborate with the Office of Climate Policy and Coordination. I know there's something in the work plan for 23, but I really think we should have something reflecting that in 2022 this issue mattered to us as well.
I think the issue may have mattered, but I have yet to see anything very specific that we can properly take credit for having done. If you read back on what was in what we had originally said, I don't think we had anything to do with laying out the county's new position or any involvement in hiring or the scope of that job. So we did not send any letters as a commission on that I'm aware of. And I don't want to ever put us in a position where we're saying we did something and someone says, oh, really? Where, when, how? And I don't think we did. We wanted to give guidance, but
some other groups that push for a climate officer. So you may be right about that. One other thing I did want to flag on page 4, the plan under supported the draft FNRP. It points to worrisome declines in individual neighborhoods. That seems to sort of soft pedal the amount of tree loss. Reviewing the Davie report, they look at the 30 largest civic associations and the loss between 2008 and 16, and 23 of the largest had significant declines. So I think we should wordsmith that a little bit to not make it sound, oh, there was a neighborhood here and there that lost trees. It could just be to say declines in many neighborhoods or most neighborhoods, but I really feel like that language soft pedals a pretty serious concern.
Okay, do we know factually if it declined in most neighborhoods?
Well,
I have no problem.
Davie maybe Vincent, did Davie do the full 60, or is there some reason just the 30 largest are referenced in the report? That would be a good thing.
It was the size of the page that limited the amount. They did a study on every single one.
Oh, awesome. Maybe we could get that detail.
I wouldn't say it's every, they do have a separate map that's in the report where you can see the change between 2011 and 2016, and where it's showing probably about a third of the neighborhoods with a decline and some just staying flat and some increasing.
So if we use the word many neighborhoods,
Right, I mean, that's up to you.
Yeah, maybe that would do the trick, Phil.
Yeah.
which bullet point are we talking about here?
Yeah,
The one-
Kit is right on this, that it was a surprising number of neighborhoods. So I agree that we should try to convey the larger scale of this. We could just say many individual neighborhoods.
Yeah, I think that would work. I'm trying to find it on page 4. I'm blind.
Oh, it's the bullet that says supported the draft FNRP.
Oh, at the top.
midway
Got
down
it.
that paragraph.
Right.
And
If
then,
you want,
yeah,
sorry, Kit, if an alternative suggestion, I'm not trying to put words in people's mouths, but there was significant decline on residential properties across the county is an alternative way of looking at it, since we did have increases in park spaces.
that's good too.
Yeah, that works for me.
Significant decline in residential properties throughout the county.
Yeah.
Yes, and that's a factual, that's correct.
That's what we want. We want facts. That's good. Thank you.
Thanks, Vincent. And on that same page, the next bullet is APS, and then the bullet after that, somehow we took out the phrasing that we used in one of our own letters, identified what was inflated and disingenuous claims became apparently erroneous. I just don't know why we would soft pedal on our own wording in a previous letter. I mean, maybe we don't have to use that exact, but apparently erroneous is quite different. So I would just say, let's be strong and call it like it is. If we put it in a letter, then why wouldn't we put it in this?
Well, this is not a position letter here. This is a report on what we did during the year. This is our self-report card. And so while I think it's fine and sometimes very appropriate to be push, to be confrontational, because we know what's at stake, I don't think a year-end report card is a place where we need to dig hard for advocacy points. And so I might be wrong. Maybe other people, maybe there's a majority of folks here who want us to use, it was the language we used in a letter, but this is a very different kind of document. And so I open it up for other thoughts on Kit's suggestion or recommendation.
And as people ponder it, maybe like what we just did in the other example, there's a middle path, but apparently erroneous is so bureaucratic and flat. There may be unfounded or unexplained or something, but apparently erroneous just sounds like little bit of an error there.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Any thoughts
was,
from other people?
Well, I think part of the issue at the time was it wasn't well explained, so unexplained certainly works. We found out after the fact of our meeting there was a foundation to the claim, which is still being debated whether it was correctly calculated or not. Vincent obviously has his strong views one way, but questions have been raised by others. But at the time of the meeting and the time we wrote our letter, it wasn't explained to us. So that works for me for what it's worth.
Identified
unexplained, yeah, we don't need apparently, they were unexplained to us. There was this assertion this would happen or could be achieved. But,
other thoughts?
I don't have the same negative reaction to erroneous that Kit does, but I understand her point.
Josh, no, I'm sorry. Anyone else have a thought on this one way or the other? Is identified unexplained claims a better way to describe it?
I think that's more accurate.
I'm fine with that.
Okay.
Would the word questionable work?
Oh, that would be a good one too. Identify questionable claims. We certainly questioned them.
It's our job.
Thoughts? Someone must have thoughts.
Okay, I'll weigh in. These are supposed to be a quick summary of what we did. And I think if we get, I had recommended that we cut it way back. So anyway, I think just get it over with, get it out the door. It's, it's an inventory and you got to remember who your audience is. It's the county board. This is what we did. Relitigating this stuff, I think makes no sense. But anyway, that's just my opinion.
Bill, just pick a word. You're signing it. You pick a word.
I'm excited. I'm deciding it. I'm sticking with unexplained.
Okay.
I tend to agree with Carolyn on this one.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, Kit, from your
One last
minute
thing.
changes
last
that you're
thing.
bringing to us?
Page 6, advise on public and private development plan. Second sentence, simply to delete something. Assess potential impacts to the county stream canopy, natural habitat, and wildlife. Take out to devise approaches to optimize, and just say to optimize. I guess I'm a recovering bureaucrat, and this stuff makes me crazy. So let's just say to optimize rather to devise approaches to optimize. And that's
Okay.
it.
Tell me once again where we are. Sorry.
Sorry,
I was writing my
page
notes.
Page 6, the advise on public and private development plans paragraph. It's the second one down. Review site plans for private developments.
Yes, I have it.
And in that next sentence after wildlife, just delete devise approaches to optimize and just say to optimize.
Sure.
And that's my parsing for tonight. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you for yours. Okay, I'm doing that unless there's some outcry not to make that change. Did anyone else have any changes to the letter?
I have just a couple of questions that may result in changes.
Okay.
Realizing this is the style of letter of an inventory of our work, and one of the chapeau paragraphs in terms of our goals in promoting tree canopy coverage in Arlington, do we insert the specific of the 40% plus goal or something like that? I just throw that out to the group so there's a number we're all aiming for here, but if not, that's okay too. And kind of the very first page where what's the phraseology? Providing recommendations to protect and improve the health and sustainability of Arlington's urban forests and other natural spaces to achieve our 40%, exceeding 40% goal, because I think we've worked that into a few things, or it's what we're aiming for. But I just offer that. If you don't want to do it, that's okay too. And then second, in terms of the criteria for representation and coordination, we've had a number of groups that have consistently made public comments to our commission, ATAG being one of them, for example. And does that meet the criteria of working groups or liaisons are engaged regularly with? And so can we keep them in the list? Because I think they were cut out. And if they don't make the cut this year, should we invite them to make a more formal presentation to the group so we understand their work better, rather than having them just always have a public comment? But it seems like they provide useful information. They're engaged in this issue like some of the other groups. Yes, they have an advocacy position, but other groups there also have ideas they want to achieve. So I was kind of puzzled why they were ultimately cut out of the list.
I recommended taking them out of the list because I don't believe they're similar to the other groups that we have partnerships with. I think ATAG is clearly and effectively an advocacy organization, and we don't partner with them. They share information with us, and that's fine. Other groups might too, but we're not in a working relationship with any advocacy group that I'm aware of. And I don't think it's appropriate for us to list them as someone with whom we're in a partnership when that factually doesn't seem to me to be correct.
Well, I guess that's why I'm asking, because I don't see partnership there. I see engaged regularly with other commissions, working groups, and organizations. If they're appearing regularly at our commission, I guess that's why I'm asking.
They're appearing because they choose to appear. We're not inviting them to appear. Okay. Okay, I'm just saying I don't think that they're the same. If you look at them and look at other entities which would be listed there, I think they're a different kind of an organization. They're effective, they're valuable, but I don't see us having a working relationship with them.
Well, since the definition at the top doesn't include working relationship, there's this issue of engaging regularly. That's,
Okay, I'm going to move us on now because I don't think that they belong. And unless, I'll be quiet for a minute and see if there's several other people who say, Phil, you're wrong here. That's great. And then we'll talk about it more, but I don't want to take more time tonight on this because from discussion with at least some board members, I believe there is some support for the position that I took. So any comments from anybody? Sounds like there is not support for having them listed there in the absence.
that is fine. Then we should be more clear on what the criteria is for involving who should be on that list or not. I'm fine with that decision insofar as the description there accurately matches the criteria we're using to include or exclude groups. And working partnership is not there.
What wording are you recommending?
Well, the phraseology you use would exclude them. So we should include something like that if we then have that kind of relationship with the other groups listed there. This would be page 2, representation.
I see it. Thank you.
So that was the origin of my confusion, not understanding precisely what those were referring to.
We did not, so they did not serve. We did not have a liaison with them. They do not have a liaison on our commission. We did not engage regularly with them as we do other commissions. We engaged regularly with some individuals who are members of ATAG, but we did not engage with them organizationally wise. I don't see the issue. I'm throwing it open to other people. I might be stubborn. Who else thinks that the language here should be changed so that greater clarity?
Engage regularly, as I was suggesting, you clarified that a little bit, that we don't reach out to them, they reach out to us. So that meets that criteria. If that's what you mean by engage regularly.
If you're talking about public comment, sure. But public comment is public comment. It's not.
Right. Well, so you've explained that is them reaching out to us, not us reaching out to them. But that's why then I pose the other question. Okay, fair enough. This year, that was the structure of the relationship, if you want to call it that. But then maybe we should have them make a more formal presentation to us so we understand their work better and goals.
Do we want to have advocacy groups make presentations to us?
Well, we have other groups present to us on the work they're doing to save trees and preserve the environment. We had the folks that do when you can put the land to the side to preserve it and things like that. They're advocating for that. I mean, what is advocacy?
Okay.
Could I suggest that this is a broader conversation that doesn't need to be solved for this letter?
No, I appreciate that now, but thanks for having the conversation. So I now understand better what we mean by that criteria.
Okay, I'm going to say we're going to move on.
Please.
Other comments for the draft letter that everyone has had multiple swings at, or has had opportunities to have multiple swings. And I understand everyone's busy, and this last draft was just 2 days ago. So I do understand why people are using this opportunity to raise reasonable questions and ideas and suggestions. Is there a motion to approve this letter as amended by the 2 changes that I put in from earlier discussion?
I'll move.
Thank you. Is there a second? I didn't hear one. Was there one?
Second.
Oh, thank you.
Second.
Any further discussion? Okay, all in favor? Well, let's do it. Actually, let's raise hands. All in favor? I'm sorry, I mean on the system. Raise hand if you're in favor. Sorry, you guys were very there. Okay, is everyone's hand up who wants to vote? Okay, and then let's bring your hands down.
Phil,
Yes?
I'm showing up, I think on, my name is not showing up on my end. Is my hand raised on your screen?
Where are you? Yes, your hand is. You're at the top. Number.
Okay, that's not, yeah, that's weird. It's not showing up. I'm
Okay.
on my end, I'm unknown.
Okay, I've got three commissioners who are not voting yes. So, and that's okay.
Mine's
so
just
let's
a
bring our hands.
matter, I can't raise my hand.
Okay.
And I'm going to abstain on this one.
Okay.
At least one person did add their hand, Phil, I think just now. John.
So leaving our hands up or taking them down? Sorry, Phil.
Everybody, if you're voting, make sure your hand is up right now. We know that David and his hand is showing is up.
Yeah. The way I'm seeing it, the only person that's abstaining is Caroline, and the rest is voting yes.
Yes, that's how I see it too. So, okay, thank you all very much. We will send a letter out with these adjustments, well, tomorrow or Monday. Thank you. I appreciate your patience on this. Next, we have another letter which Carolyn prepared regarding the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Plan. Does anyone have comments or questions? It was really a kind of a restructuring of an earlier letter that Carolyn made to address some specific changes that were in the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Plan update as a result of our earlier letter. Did I describe that correctly, Carolyn?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add is that this was kind of requested by staff because they're looking for letters before it goes to the board. So I didn't want to give an unqualified yes to it. I mean, we do, but wanted to make sure that the reason why, we're supporting it is because they actually did at least include that reference to the Forestry Natural Resource Plan and how the plans should speak to each other. So I just wanted to restate that that was essentially what our comment was earlier.
Mm-hmm. So any questions? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the letter?
Move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Excellent. Assuming there's no discussion since no one had any 48 seconds ago. So let's go ahead. We'll do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, this motion carries. The letter will also go out tomorrow with no changes from the version that you all saw today. One housekeeping thing I want to raise real quickly. I sent out a poll on when we want to have our 2 virtual meetings next year and also where we want to have our in-person meetings. And I want to thank the 10 of you who responded to one poll and 9 who responded to the other. Based on those results, it appears that there was a 2-to-1 majority support for holding the on-site meetings at the Arlington County Government Building. And Vincent will try to find space there for our January meeting. And also there was a little bit of a split of support for when we hold our virtual meetings. And I'm going to make the decision that we're going to have it in February of 2023, and then the next one will be in December 2023. So when we're most likely to have inclement, cold, nasty weather, dangerous weather, and also when we might be distracted by holidays as well. So thank you all for participating. First time I've tried the poll, and we may use it again. So they've already told me twice that the price for the free poll is going up, and I better sign the contract right away. So that's how that works. Vincent, is there anything you want to point out from the staff report for us?
I'm going to be a stickler and make you vote for the November minutes.
Oh, shoot. Okay, yeah, thank you. Vincent did share with us all the minutes from our November meeting. And did anyone have comments or concerns or questions?
I just have a quick question. I think I actually did a report, but it was no report. So when we say no report, Can we say something like they didn't meet or something like that? That was just.
I can change that before I post it.
Okay, that's a good thing. We don't want to let people think you're not doing your job. Okay, so is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I move.
Is there a second? Noreen, your second. Carolyn was the mover. All in favor, say aye verbally. Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Thank you for making sure we took care of that. Vincent, is there anything from the staff report that you want to make sure that we're aware of, just in case some of us aren't so good at reading all the way to the bottom of an email?
I'll keep it very brief. I want to thank the Forestry and Natural Resource Commissioners who are working on site plans. It seems like you all have a great system set up for that. So looking forward to the engagement there. We have reviewed the first landscape plans and civil engineering plans for Penn Place, which is Amazon HQ2, and provided comments. We are moving towards electrifying some of our equipment in our tree crew fleet. We have installed charging stations in our bucket truck. So there's 4 charging stations for our batteries, which should be exciting for our electrification project. You may have seen some trees planted along Route 50 with our new VDOT permit. We're excited about those. We may have to move a couple of them around because of a future project, but we're expecting most of them to get established soon. We also met on an art project in Shirlington at 2700 South Nelson Street. This is an art project that will represent the about to be demolished Inner Ear Studios, which is famous for the DC hardcore scene recordings back in the 80s and 90s, which is dear to my heart. But that will become an open space commemorating that legacy and also providing open space for the community there, including trees. So we're working on that. And I think that's it. There's a short report on specimen trees. We found that 2 specimen trees had died and we have taken them off the list. And we are adding some more pretty soon. So you'll see more about that.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Commissioners, are there any other reports that you want to make verbally or things that you want to share with the group before we adjourn?
Well, bit late to launch into a missing middle housing study discussion, but just let everybody know that, the Planning Commission's meeting today, that public session on Tuesday, there was lots of good comments. So please pay attention to the readouts. You may be getting email or review yourself. But just overall frustrating, I feel that are several letters about this in terms of preserving the tree canopy in a fashion. The concern about trees has been heard, but I, at least personally speaking, don't see them taking enough steps.
Josh, I'm watching it right now, and I've been watching it, and there was a discussion about half an hour ago. And I was able to at least text a little bit of information along the way because they were a little bit off track. And Vincent, for your information, they were not aware of the fact that there are the 2 lists. The PhD staff was not aware of both the shade tree list as well as the small ornamental list. So anyway, at least we got that into the record, and we'll see whether there's a motion tonight or not, but they're going probably till about 11. So we may have a motion tonight, but at least they discussed it. So there's some hope.
Okay,
sorry,
so
didn't mean to interrupt,
tuned.
but I just wanted to give you an up-to-date.
No, thanks for that. So both of us have raised the point of there's a way to put more trees on the lots, if you will. So please take steps to do that, to aim for a higher tree canopy coverage. So let's see what happens, and maybe we regroup in January on it then, since we may have new information. Your thoughts, Phil, on how to approach this?
I'm glad you spoke up. This was one thing I wanted to make sure we had a chance to talk about with you and Carolyn and Steve, who've been observing and participating as to how we should weigh in and when. I don't know if there's any urgency for us to do something before our January meeting or not, but we could discuss a letter quicker if that makes sense. We could hold it and basically have a letter prepared at the meeting for us to vote on, if that's something that would make sense.
Well, do we have a little bit of dilemma in timing? Help me out, Vincent, or maybe Phil, you know, January board meeting would be the 21st of January, and our next meeting would be the 26th of January. Am I
Yes.
or would it be the 19th? Would it be the 19th?
No, it's the 4th Thursday, so it would be the 26th.
So maybe we do need to have a quick vote on, depending on what we learn the next week, between what the PC does or whatever else developments. We may have to
we could
reiterate some
come
of our
up with
points
a
or
letter
not,
from
Caroline?
everything
Sorry.
we've already said. So, you know, it's not like we'd have to be voting on anything new.
Fair enough.
What we'd be pushing is the one shade tree plus the one ornamental as part of the RTA, which it sounds like may get in this planning commission report, so we could support that. And, we could turn our letter around pretty quickly on that. So the fact that we've already got the content there, I think if, depending on what you and Vincent think, if we want to, but I think we may, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Was there anything about setback requirements? There was some sympathy for that.
Yeah, there was a little bit about setback requirements and flexibility. Couple commissioners raised some issues about that wanting, so we might, that would be one thing we'd add. Thank you, Steve.
Could we decide tonight for the team that's been working on this, Carolyn leading it, to prepare a letter that includes, as appropriate, the increasing the tree canopy and tree plantings by using second understory trees, or whatever the right language is, and also what you were just saying just now. So we're on record among ourselves as approving a letter that can include as appropriate these different elements.
Plus the issue that Steve raised of setbacks, which was not in the last letter. So I would add that one in.
Okay. So and we kind of have talked about that, and we've seen presentations on the setback issue. So if there's any, I think I'm looking for a broad motion to authorize a letter to cover the material information that we've already been on record for, as well as the information, our recommendations on setback change.
And as a response to the planning commission results tonight, I guess, maybe.
Yes, that's perfect.
So I would make a motion, just what Phil just said, unless somebody else has an amendment to it.
No.
Hope somebody was writing that down.
Okay,
Sorry, Cole.
is there a second? Colt, okay. Good. So any further discussion?
Well, just on the setbacks, thanks very much for raising that point, because apropos of my question earlier on the planning division, getting some potential instruction to look at reducing lot coverage. I think this is going to be a big issue.
This is different from lot coverage, much different.
No, I appreciate, but it may end up with a kind of a similar effect in terms of creating greater amounts of green space.
Because lot coverage is including the FNRP, but this is a setback issue, so it's two separate issues. I don't want to confuse them, because they're going to do it.
Please don't bring up lot coverage. I didn't mean it in that fashion. It's more this generic for us to try to increase green space on a lot. That it's good we lay down some or repeat some points now, because we may be reapproaching them in a more urgent fashion in the coming months, depending how the mini missile housing study works out. So thanks for including that. Okay, sorry, that was my intervention there.
That's fine. We're moving quickly here and want to make sure we have things covered properly. Any other comments or thoughts? Then why don't we go ahead and vote? Let's do this on just an audible voice vote. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Okay, all opposed? And all abstaining. Okay, it's unanimous. Thank you all very much for bringing it up and working through a workable solution, so that at least we're poised to act when we know what we're acting on. Because we'd hate to lose an opportunity to weigh in and hopefully bring rationality to the process. Anything else to be discussed tonight?
Phil, just for the notes, when will you be voting on this? Will you be voting on this at the next meeting?
It may
No,
have to go before
the
then.
letter's going out, we just did vote on it.
Okay, so you will be voting on having the letter drafted and sent.
Yes,
Gotcha. Okay.
yes, and we will share a copy, as we have done sometimes, with the full commission in advance, asking for a quick turnaround if anybody has heartburn. But otherwise, noting that if it includes the elements we've talked about, that it has already been approved and we can send it out.
Phil, I had one brief question for Vincent.
Sure, of course.
Vincent, on the staff report, you had a section on the inn in Roslyn. And as I understand what you said, they are not meeting their tree canopy requirements. They came in and said, well, we can't because we have physical constraints. But the question I had is that apparently doesn't excuse them from meeting their tree canopy requirements, right? The tree canopy requirements must be set by the sector plan. Is that the way it works?
Yeah, they need to figure it out. So that's why that's still in review. This is Melissa's working on that project, and I can get you more information offline. But I'm happy to. I'll make a note that I check with her tomorrow.
Okay, good. It's just good that applicants can't come in and say, well, we can't meet it because of our situation. No, you still have to meet it.
You have to have a hardship reason, and redevelopment rarely comes under hardship reasons.
That makes a lot of sense. Thanks.
Okay. So any other questions, any other things to raise? I want to thank you all for your good nature, your good humored approach to discussion, and things that are really difference makers for our community going forward. I do feel honored to be the chair of this commission, which is by far the coolest, best commission in Arlington. And so thank you. I also want to wish you all a wonderful holiday season. I hope you're able to get out and enjoy our woods, the meadowlands that we have, which are just in a few spots, our nature, and hopefully when we talk a year from now, we'll have a little bit more of those natural areas to enjoy. But thank you all so much. I really appreciate what you do, and I look forward to seeing